Saints. Good morning and welcome to Stuttgart Harvest Church. I am very glad that you guys are here. See, Taylor, they have plenty of time to get off the stage. Not a problem. He was like, now, if we do welcome song teaching, is that going to give everybody time to get off the stage? I'm like, of course that's going to give them plenty of time to get off the stage. They're not old or anything. I mean, look at that. Look at how smooth. I'm just messing. Man, I am so glad to see you guys this morning. Memorial Day, as Jeremy mentioned, such a big day, such an important day for our nation. And kind of not really connected to anything with Memorial Day this morning, our teaching topic, but in some ways, I don't know, maybe in some ways it is, because I can remember, I always used to joke when I was in high school. I said, you know, when I turn 18, we're probably going to have something big happen, you know, where I'm going to have to go to war or something. It's probably going to happen. And I can remember joking about that, not really serious about it. I turned 18 on May the 5th, 2001. So obviously just a few months later, you know, I mean, you know kind of how things went from there. And because I can remember when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I can remember how much I was looking forward to being 18, because in my mind, when I turned 18, I was going to be an adult. Now, I have learned since that I was not an adult at 18. I thought I was looking forward to it, because in my mind, you know, 18, that's an adult. And I can remember when I was, again, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old, when my parents would hold me to a standard, you know, an expectation. I can remember mumbling to myself, you know, I can't wait until I'm 18 and I'm able to make my own decisions, do my own thing. You know, now it's kind of like I've seen the meme recently. It's like I wish somebody would tell me what to do now. You know, I was so looking forward to making my own decisions. Now would someone tell me what to do? I never said it out loud because my dad would not have appreciated that. But I thought it, you know, I can't wait until I'm 18 years old. I can get out and do my own thing. I think we can, to a certain degree, all relate, whether you're maybe you're a student. You know, we've got several students in here. I know where you're at. I know where you're sitting. I know where you normally sit. They're over there like, ooh. But whether you're a student and you're in that stage, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, if you're a parent, we kind of all understand that there's a constant conflict at home at a certain point between individuals that want to do their own thing and then the person in the house that kind of needs to continue to have influence over that person. But really and truly, as we grow and as we develop, as we get older, naturally, there's going to be some tension between adults and blossoming adults, right? Adults and blossoming adults. You know what I mean by that. And honestly, it's a tension that really I think should be there. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think that tension between adults and blossoming adults is a bad thing, because really what the tension is that desire as we develop and as we grow and as we get older. It's that desire to kind of want to have some responsibility for ourselves, a little bit of autonomy, kind of do things the way we want to do them, our own decisions. Because when you think about it, really the entirety of development of life with our kids, in the beginning, at infancy, well, they are 100% dependent on you, right? I mean, we know that. If you've had kids or if you've been around an infant at all, you know, total dependence. And then even into early childhood, they're dependent upon you, upon the caregiver, whoever that happens to be. Then, of course, as we begin kind of getting into middle childhood, that starts to shift a little bit. We begin to be a little bit more independent. Some, it happens earlier than others, but at the end of the day, it happens. And then, of course, adolescence arrives. And that's when we really begin searching for our identity and for our independence. Usually, it's in adolescence that the real tension begins between adults and blossoming adults, speaking from an individual who in his house right now has in her mind, blossoming adult, and I know the tension of which I speak. It's a good thing. It's supposed to be there. I want it to be there because I want her to move from the stage of dependence to the stage of independence, but tension, right? Of course, it's natural. In fact, if we never get to a place where there's tension, very possibly it means because we haven't really begun taking on some of that responsibility, autonomy for ourselves, and we might stay dependent forever, which That's not God's plan. That's never been God's plan. That's not the way he set this thing up. And so in that way, the tension that we're kind of talking about this morning is a good thing. How we get from dependence to independence, however, that's different. In fact, really, that's what we're talking about this morning. We're talking about the tension. The tension's there. We know it's there. Blossoming adults, right? We know that's there. But how do we get there? What are the stages? What are the steps? That's the real tension. And in recent years, just to be perfectly honest with you, there seems to have been a trend, and we've seen this over the last maybe generation or so. There's been a trend maybe toward a later and later launching into the world than maybe what we've been used to and what we've been used to seeing. There's been a noticeable maybe slowing of development so that maybe we're getting to the point of independence from dependence and adulthood a little bit more slowly. Some of you maybe have picked up on that. And some of you are like, yeah, I've noticed that. And, it's a little later. So I guess our topic for this morning is kind of related to that. It's kind of related to the question of what is right and what is wrong when it comes to going from dependence to independence. And maybe more serious even so is when is right, when is wrong, dependence, independence. And I'm going to tell you right now, I tried, in fact. I wish I could get into Scripture this morning and give you all the answer that is going to absolutely answer the question, relieve the tension. I wish I could go to Hezekiah chapter 4, verse 6, where it would have said, at the age of fill in the blank, your child will be an adult. And they'll be okay, they'll be ready. They'll be ready to tackle the world and make the most of it. I wish I could do that. Students, if you're in here this morning, I wish I could go to Elijah chapter 2, verse 5, where it says, kids, don't worry, at the age of blank, your parents are going to get off your back. They're going to leave you alone. They're going to let you make your own decisions, sink, swim, whatever. I wish I could do that. I can't. And here's the reason why I can't, because there is no Hezekiah. There's a King Hezekiah, but there's no book of Hezekiah. There's no book of Elijah even. You'd think there would be, but there's not. Really and truly, when it comes to the topic that we're unpacking this morning, there's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of specific information specifically directed toward children, raising children, adult children, and kind of that relationship, that parental-child relationship. There's not a lot of specific information. We don't really have a lot to alleviate a tension that all of us feel, have felt, or probably will feel. But that doesn't mean we have nothing from which to draw from. We do have some information in Scripture to draw from. That's what we're going to be talking about this morning. What we do have, very important. And I believe what we have is more than enough to set not only us, ourselves, but also our children on a path that is going to lead to the life that we hope they live, and probably they also hope that they live. We have enough, because what we have in Scripture are several things. One, we have just the general truth, the general wisdom that comes with being a Christ follower. We have that, and it's applicable in this situation. But we also have a few places, not many, but a few, where we get more specific details in Scripture, specifically the New Testament, on what to do, how to raise our kids, and kind of that topic of, being a disciple of Christ at home. And what does that look like? And how do we do it? So that's our topic for this morning, and we're going to read a set of verses, 3 in particular, that are near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you why they're near and dear to my heart. Because I had to memorize them. I didn't just have to memorize them. I had to write them over and over and over. Like my mom, love her to death. Good person, good woman. She made me write this every time I did something that I shouldn't do. So I have this memorized. I don't actually have it memorized in the version we're going to read it this morning. I have it memorized in the King James, but it says the same thing. Here we go. Ephesians chapter 6. You knew it, right? Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Paul writes this: children, obey your parents, because you belong to the Lord. And this is the right thing to do. Now, that's not how I memorize it. I memorize it like this: children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. That's what Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 means to me. So I don't know if you've got this memorized by heart like I did, if you had to write it over and over like I did, but this verse, this collection of verses actually has more to it than maybe you first realized. It's actually more going on here, because what Paul really is trying to unpack in this letter to these Christ followers in the church in Ephesus. What Paul is trying to unpack is the development of the person, okay? The development of the person from childhood all the way through adolescence into adulthood so that our kids are going to have the best opportunity to have the life that they hope to live and that we hope that they live. So really and truly, the best way to read Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3 is not so much about a rule. Sometimes we read it like it's a rule. It's a law. It's kind of it's like one of the 614 laws, you know. It's not really what this is. It's better to read Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3 as a principle. It's a principle. Might even think of it as scaffolding, okay? That's probably the best way to think of Ephesians chapter 6, scaffolding. So what really Paul is encouraging parents to do here, and what he's encouraging children to kind of surrender to, maybe, would be the phrasing. Put good structure in your life, good scaffolding in your life in the beginning, so that as you develop along the way, you're going to be ready for the next step, the next stage, the next opportunity. That's what Ephesians 6, verse 1, 2, and 3. So let me give you a very clunky analogy. I know it's clunky because I came up with it, okay? So it's going to be clunky. But I want you to imagine for a moment that there's a river, okay? A river, it is a wide river, it is a deep river, it is a raging river. It is a dangerous river. And this is a river that you cannot cross in one jump, right? You can't. If you try, you're going to fall in. It's going to be catastrophic. You might drown. Now I want you to imagine that in the middle of this wide, deep, raging river are some stepping stones, right? Some stepping stones. And these stepping stones make traversing the river manageable. Not easy. Not without danger. Not without potential to slip, fall, none of that, but manageable. Now the river in my analogy that's life. Right? It's life. Life is scary. Life is difficult. Life carries with it some inherent dangers and some not so inherent dangers that we just kind of create on our own. We live in a broken world. Life's tough. But the stones that make traversing the river manageable, well, that's those stages of development. That's those things that our kids need to learn. And they need to grasp before they're ready for the next step, before they're ready for the next thing. So the river is life, the stones are kind of the stages. What Ephesians chapter 6 is basically Paul focusing on the very first stone, the very first thing that our kids must grasp in order to go the rest of the way. And if they don't get this, the rest of it's going to be much, much more difficult. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 in this way is the first stepping stone to help our kids, grandkids, any child, in fact, that we have. I mean, you talk to a teacher, they're going to tell you this is important. To cross that wild, raging, sometimes dangerous river called life. That's what Ephesians 6 is. It's this principle. So Paul starts off by saying, hey, parents, kids, listen. You got to learn obedience in the beginning. You have to learn how to obey. Parents, you need to get this right. And when you get this right, if you get this right, it's going to act as the scaffolding, the structure, so that for the next thing that comes, they're going to be ready for it. They're going to have the scaffolding, the structure that they need in order to take the next step and the next step. So the first stage, the first stone, it begins with learning childhood obedience. But that childhood obedience is not the end, it's just the beginning, it's the development of the person. And it leads to lifelong integrity, lifelong character. The types of things that we know as adults, or I hope we know, as adults actually lead to a better life, and it leads to better decisions, better choices, a better person, a better employee, a better husband, a better wife, a better friend. These are the things that lead to those things. Paul says it begins very simply. Teach them to obey. Teach them obedience. Now, every stone matters. Back to the analogy, the clunky analogy. Every stone matters. We know that. Every stone matters because if you miss a stone, think about it like this. If you miss a stone, if you miss one of those important stages of development, that next one that you've got to get to, it may be too far now. And you are in a better risk of actually falling in the river. Catastrophic failure. in some way, the chance for failure grows. And so each stone matters. It's important. Parents, really in this way, what Paul is unpacking here is that obedience, learning that in those early stages of development when we still have influence, because that's important. Influence is important. When we still have the influence and we still have the ability, obedience, Paul says, is the best way to set our children on a path that is going to lead to a good life then and a better life down the road. They're going to have what they need. They're going to start with what they need. That's going to hopefully lead to people of integrity and character. But it starts with kids. Obey mom and dad. In fact, kind of the way I think fits as well is this. Kids, hey, you need to learn to trust that mom and dad, their way, it's the better way. Notice I didn't say always the right way, because I'm a parent. I know it's not always the right way. I've made mistakes, plenty. I didn't even say it's the best way. God's way is the best way. And any time that my way goes up against God's way, then God's way is the best way. That's not the best way. Kids, hey, listen. Mom and dad may not have it all figured out. They don't. They'll tell you, hopefully, if they're being honest. But trust them. Their way might be the better way. It really kind of leads right into the relationship that we have with God. Do I trust that God's way is the right way, the best way, or not? And if I don't, I'm going to do my own way, which is defined as we've talked about many times, that's sin when it comes to my relationship with God. Kids, this is important. This is important for their relationship with God down the road. It's important for their development with other people down the road. Learn to trust that mom and dad's way, it's not always necessarily the right way, but it's certainly going to be the better way more than often than not. Okay, so that's verse 1. Learn to obey. Good structure, good stability. It all starts there. Now, Paul moves on and he writes, honor. We're going to come back to this, by the way. We're going to come back to this at the end this morning. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. So again, like I've already told you, this is a principle. It's not so much a rule. It's not so much a law. It's a principle. And so here Paul is making a promise. He's saying, hey, if you get this right, there's going to be an outcome that comes with it. I like promises. I'm a promise guy. I enjoy a good promise. I especially enjoy a good promise that is made by someone that I can trust is going to keep their promises. God has never broken a promise. Therefore, God's made a promise. He's going to keep a promise. And the promise is, if you do this, if you put this structure in place, if you take these stages of development and you get this right, eventually it's going to lead to something, I promise. It's a principle. If you honor, here's the promise, if you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on the earth. Now, I was taught this maybe a little bit misinterpreted. Because, and just my story, the background and the faith tradition I grew up in, kind of the way I was taught this was, if you're obedient and you do all of these things the way you're supposed to do it, you're going to live a long life. That's kind of the way I was taught it. That's not what that's saying. It's not what it's saying. What it's saying is this. Remember, it's a principle. It's saying if you do this and you learn obedience and you have good character and you're a person of integrity, and you learn all of the things that come with all of that, then the results are going to be your life's going to go better. It's a principle. We talk about that all the time. It's not so much a right or a wrong or a rule or a law. This is simply the way God has created the world. For instance, let me give you another principle. The principle of sowing and reaping. Right? We've heard of this one. The principle of planting and harvesting. We know about planting and harvesting in Stuttgart, Arkansas. If anyone understands this principle, we understand it. We understand we plant soybeans, we're going to reap soybeans. We're going to harvest soybeans. It's a principle. It's not a law. It's not that. It's just the way God set the world up. It's a principle. We can either accept it, we can live with it, or we can try to break ourselves against it, but we're not going to break the principle. Principle's the principle. Here's another one. Principle of life. Here's what the principle of life says. Principle of life says if you're either growing or you're decaying. We don't stay static. You go in one direction or another. It's not a good or a bad or a right or a wrong. It's just a principle of the way God has created the world. This is that. If you do these things, life's going to go better. If you learn these things when you're young, things are going to go better. Doesn't mean perfectly. Doesn't necessarily mean without problem, fault, danger, error. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It simply means you got a better chance. That's what Paul is communicating here. So in this way, he's saying, parents, you're creating the scaffolding in their life that they're going to need, which is going to lead to the character and the integrity and all of the things that come with that they're going to need so that, this is important, so that when they don't have to listen to you anymore, and that day's coming, when you no longer have the influence over them that you now have, that day's coming. They're going to be ready because they're going to be able to navigate a very, very wide, deep, raging river called life. Because home is the training ground, right? It's where we start. Teachers, coaches, you guys know when you get a student that has had this training ground, you know how much easier it is. And you know when it's not. And now it's on you. You've been given this buck of teaching obedience, which is the scaffolding for everything else that you're going to go through for the remainder of the development. And how do we do it? Well, one of the ways that we do this is through boundaries, right? Boundaries. Not boundaries for control. That's a misunderstanding of a boundary. Boundaries that are simply acting as the scaffolding to help our kids develop the self-control they're going to need and the responsibility and the accountability, the character, the integrity that they're going to need to operate as adults. It's a principle. That's all it is. We're not getting around it. You say, well, I don't know that I like that principle. It doesn't matter. This is the way God has created the world, and it starts here. This is stage one of learning how to survive and, I hope, thrive in the world. Scaffolding to learn, as we've already mentioned, integrity and character. And what is integrity? Integrity is simply this. I can be trusted, right? You're a person of integrity. That means you are a person who is trustworthy, who cannot wait. If you have a job opening, my brother, he's always hiring new people. I'm talking to him all, he's like, I got to do an interview here and an interview there. I know for 100% fact the first question that he asks or doesn't ask is, so I can't trust you, right? No, of course not. You want to hire somebody that's trustworthy. First and foremost, are you trustworthy? Can I trust you? That's integrity. Character, you're doing the right thing even when you don't have to, when no one's watching. Character, integrity, obedience, it starts there. It starts with that very simple, almost seemingly childlike lesson that if we miss it, every other lesson is more difficult. And we may not lead to people of integrity and character, and you know as good as I do. This ain't Bible, this is life. People that are not people of integrity and character, life's difficult. Life's difficult. And that's not the type of person that you want to be around, work around. It's not the person you hire. It's not the person that you keep. It's the person you get rid of. Because all of these things together, they lead to the things that we know lead to a better life, which that's the promise. It's the principle. Things are going to go well with them. Things like learning how to work hard. Learning how to work hard, learning how to relate to others, right? Learning how to, the guy that I've worked for off and on over the years, he uses this phrasing, learning how to play well with others in the sandbox. Yeah, I always like that. Like, yeah, learning how to share my toys in the sandbox. That's not natural, is it? If you have more than one kid that are within 3 years apart, you know. It's not natural. It's important, though. How to handle conflict. How to love. How to forgive. All of these things that we know are the things that we want our kids and the people that we have influence over. We want that for them. Why? Because we know it leads to a better chance at a better life. Just like God through Paul promises. It's development. And it begins very simply. Children, obey. Learn to obey your parents. Even when you don't completely understand it. Even when it doesn't necessarily lead to the eventual outcome that you want it to. It's important. Because guess what? I can remember when I was 18, I can't wait to get out and do my own thing and make my own decisions. All that happened was when I got out of my parents' house, I just found more people to tell me what to do. That's all that happened. That's all I've been doing for my life. Somebody is always going to be an authority over me. And all the parents in the room said, amen, right? Yeah, come on, baby. I knew I liked this guy. Okay, let's back up, though. Let's back up to verse 2, because remember I said we were going to get back to verse 2, because verse 2 actually, listen, if we just stopped right there, you would think that this is totally a group of scriptures. This is truth from the Bible only applicable to parents of young, middle, adolescent children. But it's not. Because verse 2 is for all of us. Verse 2 applies for me, 40-something-year-old me. Honor your father and your mother. See, this is a little different. Paul kind of changes grammatically a little bit, and so Paul is adding something here beyond just the wisdom and the power of learning obedience at a young age. He says, also, you should just honor your parents in all things. Kids, honor and respect your parents, specifically their position as your parents. Because that's the role that your parents have been given in your life by God. See, for me as an adult child, for you as well, this applies to us. This is where this falls under our influence. We are influenced by this. And listen, before I go any further, I want to go ahead and kind of get a disclaimer out there. Because I know, in a room this size, this many people watching us online, there's some of us in here. You had a rough upbringing, right? Whitney kind of like in the welcome, she made a comment, we don't know what we brought into this room, the stories that we brought in the bag. That's true. That is a very true statement. We just don't know. And so I want you to know that I don't know your story, okay? And if I'm not very, very careful, if I'm not very, very loving and grace-filled with this next part, you might want to just kind of tune me out. So I'm just asking you for the benefit of the doubt as we move forward for the next few minutes. How they parent, right? How I parent. I'm responsible to God for that. That's between me and God. How my parents parent, and listen, I want to be clear, I had a great childhood. I make fun of my parents a lot, up here, and I probably should do a better job. My uncle actually called me out on it a few weeks ago. I should probably give them a break every once in a while. I'm not going to. But I'm going to give them a little bit of a kudos here for the next second or two, very, very short. I have great parents. I do. I really do. They were amazing. I had almost a storybook childhood. I really did. But that may not be your story. Your story may be the complete 180-degree opposite of my story. But how your parents parent, it's between them and God. Parents, the weight and the responsibility that we've been given as the caretaker of these children by God, it is heavy. I'm not going to lighten it. In fact, I'm going to try to make it heavier for the next moment. Parents, listen, you're not the boss. Stay with me. You're not the king. You're not God. Parents, we've been given a role in our children's life. We've been given a responsibility as a caretaker. We have not been given the title of God in their life. So parents, how we perform concerning our kids' development, that's between us and God, and you are responsible for that. I'm going to have to answer, I believe I can show this in Scripture, that I'm going to have to answer one day to how I raise my children. And I believe you will as well. The kids, and this is including me, adult children, it's between me and God how I honor and respect the role that my parents have in my life. Notice I specifically said the role of my parent. That's between me and God. Because all of us transition from childhood to adulthood, at least I hope we do. We're supposed to. That's the way God created it. All of us at some point transition. Now, what do I mean by that? Because that's the way that God designed it. Well, when we transition from childhood to adulthood, then also expectations in that parental child role change. And listen, there can be some tension here as well, right? We talk about the tension of adolescence and, going from blossoming adult to adult. There can be tension from an adult to an adult in the parent-child relationship. We know that there have been volumes of books written about this. There is a book called Boundaries. Now, that's what it's about. It's not just about that, but it is a big part of it, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So here's what adulthood means. My definition of adulthood. It just means you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your food, your shelter, your bills, your clothing. You are responsible for you. And when that happens, You have crossed over into the line of adulthood. And when you cross over the line of adulthood, according to Scripture, you have left this commandment of obedience to your parents behind. We've left that behind because I'm now an adult. But, and this is the point, we're still commanded to honor. And the parents of adult children in the room are like, I knew I liked this guy. Yeah, he's right. We're still commanded to honor the role, the position. Listen, once I can handle my food, my shelter, my bills, my clothing, all of that stuff, once I can do that, that part of their job, it's done, it's finished. They have set me on the way, hopefully giving me the things that I need in order to be successful in life. But that part's done. I'm no longer dependent, I am independent. Once our kids get to that point, they don't need me anymore. I talked a couple of weeks ago how Beth and I have this North Star. And our North Star is we want our kids to want to be around us when they don't have to be around us anymore, because they don't need us anymore. My goal is, and our decisions kind of run through that North Star of I want them to want to be around me even when they don't have to be around me because they're capable of making it on their own. It's kind of the same thing. They don't need me anymore. They can cross the river of life without me being right there to catch them, and put them back up on the stone or pull them back to the shore. Make sure they don't fall, make sure they can make it. But my position as dad doesn't change. My parents' position as my parents, it hasn't changed. They still are my parents, and according to Paul, I'm still commanded to honor them and honor that position. We leave obedience behind when we leave mom and dad's house, caretaker's house, whoever it happens to be, but we are forever commanded by God to honor the position of our parents, and that too is a principle that is connected to the promise. Honoring, what does that mean? Well, honoring simply, our definition, holding our parents in high esteem and valuing their role in our life. They still have a place of honor. They still have a place of value. But honoring doesn't require adult children to follow parents' commandments, right? We know that. It doesn't allow them to control adult decisions. That's part of that whole setting boundaries things. Now listen, the whole concept of boundaries has become like a really popular concept in our culture today. And it's a good thing. Like I said, there's been books written about it. The book by Dr. Henry Cloud, probably the most well-known one. Boundaries work both ways. That's all I'm going to say about that. Boundaries are a good thing. But here's the reason that boundaries actually are a way to honor our parents. And now I'm kind of talking to the adult kids here, talking to myself. Because boundaries actually protect that relationship. They protect love. They prevent resentment that can often grow from an expectation of overcompliance. Boundaries are a good thing. Part of honoring our parents might even mean accepting them as they are, including their human failings, including the areas where they didn't get it right. Maybe they got it very wrong, but we can do that without also condoning the harmful behavior. You can do that. You can still honor, regardless of your background. And to me, this is where it's so powerful in that even if you didn't have a great upbringing and your childhood wasn't great and you look back with your parents and you think, man, I wish, I'm never gonna, you can still honor the position, including their human failings. This might actually lead to you having to grieve the ideal parent that you didn't have and that you may never have, so that you can move forward as a healthy adult. Honoring your parents can sometimes mean that you have to deal with some toxicity. Now, let me be clear. That's another buzzword in our culture today, toxic, toxic environment, toxic relationship. And that's very accurate. That is true. But I'm not talking, when I say use the word toxicity, I don't mean mere philosophical differences, worldview differences, disagreements. That's not toxic. That's just living in a world with people that we don't agree with. That's just part of the everyday friction of life. I'm talking toxicity is real abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. We can still honor. Honor doesn't mean enduring abuse. It doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. That's not what honoring in this context means. Honoring simply means you can have your parents in a position, because they're your parents, of esteem. At a safe distance, maybe through prayer, maybe through speaking of them with dignity, or it's just not speaking of them without dignity, if that's what it takes. And again, like I've already told you, we are in a field of landmines right now. I'll admit that. I know that. This has not been an easy one to put together. Even if it's possible it's not possible to have a close connection with that parent, it's still possible to honor. And God says through Paul, honor your parents, honor that position, the role that they've been placed in your life. An adult child can't force a parent to be healthy. You can't do it. You can only lovingly point them in the direction if that's even a possibility. Honoring can also include responsibility for care. That's honoring. Listen, hey, parents. Oh, goodness. So many things that I can't even mention. I'll give you one. As we age, things change. Let me tell you something that's changing in my life right now. Noticed it about 6 weeks ago. Became abundantly clear about 2 weeks ago. Guys, I can't see. I can't see. I've always heard people say, you start doing this, right? I'm like, that's silly. It's amazing. I can't see. Like right here. Now I have to go out to here. Because as we age, we break down. Things happen physically, mentally. It happens. Honoring parents can include stepping in when necessary. The parent-child relationship might shift toward that adult-child providing care in some ways. That is a profound way to honor. So, as we begin closing this morning, bottom line, if you take absolutely nothing else from today besides this, I hope you take this. Obedience is the scaffolding. It's the first step. It's the structure. It's the thing that must be in place for everything else to fall into place to help children grow, develop toward adulthood, so that they will be people of character, integrity, and so that they will have a better opportunity and a better life by anyone's definition of better. And honoring never ends. Adult kids, we got to find a way to honor our parents, even if the story ain't what we wished it was. We got to figure it out. Young children, adult children, honoring and respecting never stops. How well they parent, how well they parented, that's between them and God, but how well we honor that position is between God and us. So, next steps. I don't know. I don't know what the next step could be off of this morning. This morning was less practical. It was very practical, but I don't know what the practical next step application is for you this morning, this week. I don't know. Maybe you need to have a conversation. Adult kids, maybe you need to have a conversation with a parent. Maybe you need to have that hard conversation that you've been avoiding for weeks, months, maybe years, decades. I don't know. Maybe that's what you need to do this week. Maybe you've been avoiding something. Maybe through this morning you've thought to yourself, I probably should do a little bit better job of honoring the position of my parent. Yeah, there are some things back through the years that I wish would have been different, and I'm certainly doing different now with my kids and my situation, but man, I probably could do a better job of honoring the position, the role that my parents have been given in my life by God. So maybe that's what you need to kind of wrestle with this week, is doing a better job of honoring your parents. Maybe if you're like me, and you've got younger kids. I've got a 14-year-old and an almost 11-year-old, soon to be 11-year-old. And so maybe you're like me and you're thinking, I got to make sure, which for me, if I hadn't got it by now, it might be too late, I don't know. But, you may be thinking, I need to do a better job of kind of putting that structure, that scaffolding in place, looking at this in that developmental step-by-step process so that when they are no longer under my influence, when I no longer am there to tell them every move to make, when I'm no longer there telling my 14-year-old, hey, Ella, have you studied? You sure? Did you get it? You need some help? Because one day she's going to be in a dorm, and I ain't going to be there. Maybe you need to start getting a little bit more strategic about some of these very important stages in your children's development. I don't know what your next step is. I do know this, though. How well we parent, as the band's coming up, how well we parent, that is between us and God, and it is an incredibly heavy weight. It is an incredibly important responsibility, and God has designed a very, very, very clear way that we help our children along these stages of development so that one day when they no longer have to listen to every word we say, they're no longer dependent because they're now independent, they'll be ready. And then the fun part begins. Because my best friend has not always been my dad. My best friend's my dad today. You know why? Because they taught me these steps. And when I was no longer under their influence, and I could do things my own way, I just kind of wanted to go back and hang out with them. Because they matter to me. Because I honor them. Not perfectly. I could have told you the story about what happened to my mom this past week, but I didn't. Did I? I could have. Ask her. This is too important to get wrong. And if you think maybe to this point you've been a little bit loosey-goosey with it, you're not nailing it, that's okay, there's time. Hey, Ephesians chapter 6, check out Deuteronomy 6 and 10, I think it is. I know it's 6. Get you a book. It's worth it. Some of y'all must know what happened. It's worth it, guys. It's too important to get wrong. Let's make a very concerted effort this week to see what God has to say about our families so that we can be a better disciple of Christ even at home. Let's pray. God, that one was hard. That really was. So God, I just ask that everything that we said was heard with a lot of grace, a lot of love, a lot of compassion. I hope it was presented that way because, boy, there's a lot of landmines there because we do live in a broken world with a lot of broken relationships, and that includes relationships between parents and children. We know that. And God, we're not perfect as a parent. I'm not perfect. I'm reminded of that all the time. So God, I just ask that everything we say, everything that we do, you let us say it and be heard with your spirit, with your love, with your grace, with your compassion, with your forgiveness, so that as we go forward this week, this month, this year, we just allow your truth to direct us in all things, but certainly in our parenting, with the influence that we have over the